Welcome back, everybody, to creating communities for neurodivergent people in the areas of a social community, a residential community, and a work environment that uses specific skills and talents that bring joy to people's lives. I have been wanting for a while now to reconnect with another therapist who's in private practice and has a very niche core clientele of neurodivergent people. And I found her. I found Natalie Zimm from one of my therapist networking organizations. So, Natalie is our guest today. Natalie is a psychotherapist, an author, and an artist. Her niche base is ADHD, AUDHD, she'll explain if you haven't heard that term yet, and autism. Plus, she works with highly gifted people and highly sensitive people, two areas of neurodivergency that we don't often think about, general public, that is. She works with creatives because she comes from a creative background, and OCD as a result of anxiety and trauma. Lastly, I would like to say that Natalie is AUDHD mixed with autism. Correct me if I'm wrong, Natalie.
Oh, yes.
And married to a wonderful man who has ADHD. So this is going to be interesting. We're going to talk about this later on. I want to say that there's an interesting aspect about you, Natalie, that just thrilled me. And that is, I'm reading from your website now. Therapy doesn't have to be boring. And it isn't just about tackling problems. I believe in bringing joy, laughter, and silliness to sessions, creating a space where healing and humor dance hand in hand. And I just love that, Natalie, because that opens the door. You are so warm and welcoming in this way, excuse me. So here's my first question. How did you find this niche audience? How did you sync up to people in these categories?
Yeah, Judith, thank you so much for having me. It's just been a pleasure to connect with you and meet you. And I feel to answer that question, really, I think it's looking over a personal experience of the course of my own life of being diagnosed early as a child with ADHD, not really fully understanding that. And then years later, knowing just my own desire, I initially started working in arts and entertainment. I wanted to be a storyboard artist and I was working in animation field. And around 2017, I was working freelance, and a lot of times when I would work freelance, it would, be feast or famine, sometimes would take on other jobs. And I started working in a treatment center. And I just really noticed, especially working in a treatment center of just a diverse population. And I really ended up enjoying working with this, went back to school. And over my course of just pursuing being a licensed marriage family therapist, just really kind of seeing and finding who my people were. And a lot of it I feel was seeing, as being later diagnosed with autism myself, was really seeing these characteristics or traits in other people around me and not, maybe saying, oh, that's not autism. And because I wasn't fully connecting this in myself. And it's really, I feel, a balance between my own hyperfixations and interests and just the serendipity of people who ended up walking through my door and the people I ended up really enjoying working with over time that I felt the strongest connection with really helped me develop just my niche and how I was able to understand on a deeper level just what it's like to experience the world in a different way.
It's so perfectly said because for all of us, when we're in our right space, doing what comes naturally or pursuing our natural interests, the doors open, the heavens open, and we start connecting in the right way. And it was so funny the event that I met you at last month. Uh, the woman who introduced us said, we just found each other here. The woman who introduced us was on the spectrum. And she said there were about four of us that connected at this meeting. We just kind of found each other. And I have always lived that way, that if you are
Mm.
your authentic self, if you are expressing yourself in a way that brings joy to your life, you'll have a life. You'll have a good life. And you just said that. So. Yeah, very happy. And I loved when I pre-interviewed you. I loved everything that you said. Next question. What issues can therapy address for this population? I just wrote down two things, but I want you to take it away. I put down masking and I put down social skills, but I think there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, I really feel that therapy is a space that people are able to have the ability to understand ourselves more. And a lot of what I feel that I work with people is that kind of being a therapist, even in a sense, is, you know, standing for social justice. So I think it's separating the aspect of how much of what we go through as people is a result of just the environment that we're in, and then what is really a result of us individually. And I feel a lot of times with people coming in, it is making sure I'm not, we're not saying, well, you're anxious, this is a you thing. It's like, well, this is also a society thing. And it's looking at both of those. But I feel that it's really being able to have compassion, understand yourself. And then there's a grieving process, I feel, that comes with people of when we do understand ourselves, of all the things that maybe we missed out on from the lack of that understanding in our life. And so then we are able to go through that grieving process, and maybe some sadness comes up, anger comes up. And I feel therapy is a great space to be able to have the ability to kind of process that without having an interjection of an opinion unless that's needed or wanted. So you have the space to say, okay, I understand this about myself. And now, wow, I really missed out on a lot of social things or opportunities, or things in my life could have been better or worse. And so I feel that therapy is really, the way I approach it is more strength based, of how can we build on the positives? How can we champion, even when we look at the idea maybe of, I feel, wrestling with an inner critic, that an inner critic is also our inner mentor. So how can we maybe hold both of those at the same time? How can we hold the, inner critic? We want to demonize that part of ourselves and remove that, but it's, how do we, and maybe in a Jungian psychology sense, is look at we look at the shadow side of that, but we want to kind of clean up these parts of ourselves in therapy. And I feel it's really beneficial to be able to do that, to kind of give us the space to have that process. And that just takes a lot of time and patience.
Okay, two things that you just said that were incredible. The first thing you said was social justice. And it's interesting because I don't think any of us, including me, looked at social justice as an issue, as a challenge, as something that would happen to us, the injustice of social justice. And what you had said to me prior to us starting this recording was the trauma that is a result of bullying. And I hadn't thought about that because people do get bullied for behavior that may seem a little different, maybe, than general behavior when you're 10, 15, whatever age we are at. Just spend a second on the social justice part a little bit more, please, because it's so important how the world treats people without understanding them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we could look at this as just a majority in general. Something I often think about is, even, am I a morning person or a night person? And I feel often we'll see morning people, say I need you to tiptoe around me at night because I'm a morning person, but then it's like, but that's to me doesn't make sense because then it's, well, if I'm a night person, then doesn't that mean I could also ask you that you could tiptoe around me in the morning if I'm sleeping in later? So it's looking at the perception and what is considered. And I think that's even the challenge with autism, right? Is that there's this sense of rules and societal rules that I feel that's the beauty of maybe autism is the ability to bypass that a little bit to be able to just be, I think when you said authenticity is be more authentic, to say what is actually happening, to say what's really on my mind, you know, and I think with the social justice aspect of it, it's just, I feel, how can we make spaces and understanding not to always, I think life isn't always about in social justice is always tiptoeing around or accommodating everybody, but it's just trying to make that effort to have humility and understand one another, to have maybe the cultural humility that this person comes from a different background than me, and I want to make an effort to understand them and even look into my own. Like that was something I read a really good book called My Body's Not a Prayer Request, and it was about a woman who has she has many physical disabilities, and reading that book even had me confront my own like maybe internalized ableism about what it means to have what biases we have or when we are considering things like that in different spaces, and I found that really helpful. So I think it's just we're never all there. We're never all there. And it's about how are we just, trying to be reflective and humble. And kind of for me, I want to admit if I miss something. And that's, I feel just, I think in a simple way of saying my commitment to that is.
Well, even from me, the time I've spent doing this show, which is under a year, and the research I did prior to that, but the wonderful people I've had the opportunity to meet and interview and learn from, what this has done for me is to reevaluate a judgment that may immediately pop up in my mind when I'm dealing with somebody whose behavior I don't understand. And it's really brought me back to, well, wait a minute. Let's not judge a book by the cover that we put on that book, because we put the covers on the book by our judgments. From what I've learned with just autism, and ADHD, I start asking myself, well, wait a minute, Judy, maybe you need to say something differently. Maybe you need to ask somebody if you need to rephrase, or how can I help you in a different way, just in my daily interactions. Um, so, yes, the social justice part of this affects everybody because we're all in relationship with one another. And to the best of our abilities, we need to be considerate and kind and welcoming and accepting of people, even though we might not completely understand some behavior. I mean,
Yeah.
a behavior that doesn't hurt people. I
Sure,
mean,
of
you know what
course.
I mean?
Yeah. And no, and I think that's I hope we would be in a space we could do. That's kind of even what, my children's book Scooter is about, is a dog who gets in an accident and he loses his back legs, and then his friends think he's different. And so the theme of the book is just really about friendship, bullying, and identity, and ableism in a certain sense. And I for him, I feel like Scooter the dog, who's a little Jack Russell, and he's on his kind of quest to, I feel, understand. It's almost him trying to understand how to not look at his way of orienting in the world now as something that is challenging, but how can he make focus on the strengths of it. And I think it's how to focus on the strengths. And I think even when we look at autism and ADHD, I have parts of me that even feel in conflict sometimes when people say it's a superpower. And it's like, well, yeah, it is a superpower. There's autistic ADHD people are usually highly creative, highly motivated, really can get things done, or, very intelligent, have very such unique ways of looking at things, but then it's also can be very debilitating. So even for me, when people say it's a superpower, it's yes, but yes, and both. It's looking at both aspects of it, I think is important to not just, sit, yeah.
No, I totally understand. And you're right. So a superpower, fine, but how? How do you harness it into an advantage that will move your life forward professionally, personally, anyway, emotionally? So you're right. Um, we ha yes, you have to be able to harness it and move it forward, and that's not easy. That takes work. That takes understanding. That takes, hold on a minute, something that you mentioned a few minutes ago as well, and I definitely want to talk to you about this. Compassion and comparison. We talked about this before. You mentioned this a minute ago, but I want to read something. The importance of getting diagnosed, the importance of therapy, because I think it is so incredibly important, and I have not really thought about it specific to neurodivergent people. But from your own website, if I may, and for anybody listening, I think Natalie said it beautifully, to consider aspects of yourself and why therapy might be so advantageous to you. So here's what you said, Natalie. Do you often find yourself exhausted after social interactions because you've been busy masking your true self all day? Are you locked in a staring contest with your to-do list and it's definitely winning? Are you struggling with a mind that tirelessly reviews every awkward moment and perceived slight? Are you feeling like your inner child is actually a tiny, perpetually overstimulated goblin? I mean, Natalie, you're hitting everything on the head. Did you grow up with a critical family member or caregiver? Were you pretty sure your childhood taught you how to be invisible when things got tough? I mean, this is everything I've been learning, Natalie. Or are you still carrying the weight of past responsibilities that felt too big for you at the time? You're not alone, and I'm here to help. And that's what people need to hear. But this was an amazing a checklist of behaviors, of inner dialogues we have with ourselves, and wondering, what's the matter with me? Why am I this way? And then, to your point earlier, you criticize yourself, you beat yourself up, you become your own worst enemy, so to speak, simply because you don't understand what's going on and that you're okay. You just have to identify these issues and deal with them. So, can you please talk about, again, extend the importance of understanding diagnosis, but then creating compassion for yourself?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I feel the compassion piece is really the most important, and the not alone piece. And usually, when I start with people, I will kind of tell folks and say, hey, what does diagnosing even mean to you? What, like, does it feel, because it's looking at the individual. People might have different views or beliefs about it. And I feel for some people, they might lean more towards saying that receiving a diagnosis is like, finally, the missing pieces, all the things haven't understood about myself, and now it's all making sense. And then some people, I feel I'm just being patient either with the in between process of that, or some people feel it's really, there's a lot of stigma to it also. It's working through and having the stigma that this means that I'm broken or there's something wrong with me. And so I feel when, rather than, approaching this as, well, this is what we're diagnosing and this is, but it's looking at, well, why do you feel that that is stigmatizing? What does that mean about you? What are those internalized cognition or messages that you have about yourself and how you make meaning? about the diagnoses. And so I feel it's, I try to be sensitive and understanding to maybe the meaning people have behind that and how we're approaching it. And for me, at least, I'll just speak personally, is that for me, being diagnosed with it as a child was maybe very helpful. I had a little bit more understanding. I didn't really start understanding even my own brain, even until, becoming a therapist, digging into this more, learning more. And the autism realization and diagnosis kind of came later. And it really, I think a big one for me, at least, was seeing how literal my thinking can be and how that really impacted my social interactions. So I went through that grieving process with autism of looking back at all the ways of maybe kids were mean to me and I didn't understand they were being mean to me, or what that kind of meant to look at that. And I think even to what you're saying also about the anxiety piece, or masking, and just it's we kind of have this cycle of the criticism of, you have, I think a lot of anxiety of being different going into a social situation, the preemptive thoughts, like the concern, the worry, the fears, and then the ones that you're experiencing. I feel, a lot of people and folks will say it's like you're just kind of holding on in the social situation, and a lot of perfectionism of, I have to say the right thing, I
Mhm.
have to be perfect, is this a rule I didn't know about, am I going to blurt something out? And you make it through the social situation. And sometimes a part, or in IFS, internal family system, we talk about managers or parts that maybe help us cope with things. And so you kind of cope to get through the situation. And then afterwards, the collapse or the shutdown, and then you start rehashing and thinking the things you said. And the cycle just feeds into each other. So having the compassion in that is what kind of, that's what I will work with people, is how do we break that cycle? And a lot of that is just meeting ourselves where we are in that cycle and accepting how painful that is instead of trying to change it immediately.
It has been said to me that labeling is wrong. People fall on different sides of labeling, which is maybe another word for diagnosis. Well, if
Mhm.
you're going to diagnose me, then you're going to label me, and that means there's something wrong with me. No. What I have always found, and this is just me, when I understand something, where there's a name to something, I can deal with it better.
Mhm.
If I need to be compassionate, I can be compassionate. I will not judge anymore. Oh my God, now I understand. This is why so and so is doing this. Okay, I get this. Now
Mhm.
I can be different. And by different, I mean good. I can be understanding. I can be non-judgmental. But the other side of that, and this is what I've learned too, and you've just said this, is we're really hard on ourselves. So many people are we are our own worst critics. And if people have what I just read off, if you can't be in large social circles, you're masking, you're trying to hold it together because large social circles don't work for us. And I know for me, Natalie, I like intimate conversations. I like two or three people max. I
Mhm.
don't like 50 people in a room. And I didn't understand when I was in college why I didn't want to go to those large parties. I
Mhm.
just couldn't deal with it. I felt like a duck out of water. And I thought, well, there's something wrong with you, Judy. I mean, come on. But yet people would say, well, but you're social, Judy. Yeah, I'm really social in a group of 3 to 4 people. I'm real good. But you put me in 50 people, watch me step back,
Mhm.
go to the dessert table, get a cup of coffee, pretend I'm fishing in my purse. I mean, I'll do these things and then maybe just leave without saying goodbye sometimes.
Yeah.
And this work that I'm doing, meeting people like you, it's just been so beneficial to me, even. But what you wrote on your website, different situations or aspect of people's personalities, please consider this because there's nothing wrong with you, but we need to talk about this so that you know there's nothing wrong with you, right?
No, 100%. And I feel like that's so well put. And I just feel like what you said is what is helpful. That what you just said and self-disclosed was 100% real. And that's what I feel is disarming to people, because even as a therapist, we're trained to be cautious about self-disclosure. And that's another conversation I'll have, with people that I'm working with, is that I'll say, hey, I will sometimes self-disclose if I find it's helpful. Please let me know if it's not. Or if they aren't at the place they can let me know that, I'll do my best to pick up on it and make sure I'm not going into that. But I think it can be extremely helpful. And I've found most of the time when I am working with ADHD or other autistic folks that for me, sometimes if I tell the story of how I forgot to buy shampoo and then I finally did it and then I left it in the back of my car for 2 months after that, and it took 2 months that, I think even that self-disclosure, even what you're saying of, struggling to be in a crowd of 50 people and me just imagining maybe the overstimulation, all the noise, maybe shutting down here and there, not knowing what to say. A lot of, I think, neurodivergence is the transitioning of conversation. So for me in larger groups, it feels challenging when you're having one conversation and then it transitions out into something else, can be really challenging. And maybe if I could say one more thing, just back to the criticism aspect, is that we're really looking at the earlier memories sometimes of childhood and how those impact us. And so one study that I read about criticism is that, when they did like brain scans around, a child that maybe had experienced criticism from their caregiver versus someone that was in physical pain, the same areas of the brain lit up. So
Mm.
it's really seeing that, I think when we understand the trauma piece, that there's capital T trauma, what people think, oh, well, I had trauma if it was like bottles being thrown and big fights and like, really out there things or big events. But really, and as Gaber Mate would say, is like trauma is the lowercase t, is like trauma is what happens inside of us. So trauma is, being bullied and maybe feeling that, I call it repeated relational violations. So the act of, I think, having a critic later in life is very informed by how we are receiving maybe criticism from peers, teachers, caregivers early in life, and then how that impacts us later in life as having our own internalized critic that then criticizes us. And that's the protection, is like, if I criticize myself first, I won't feel the devastation of somebody else doing it.
Yes, and because I'm thinking of myself again, I am my own best worst critic. Um, just going back to like kindergarten, so going back with childhood memories, when that's when we first start really interacting on a group basis, preschool, kindergarten, those early years, and we see what we're like with other people other than our own siblings and our parents, our relatives. Um, and to look at some things that I did that I didn't understand, I now understand that certain behaviors were because I just wasn't comfortable in a large group taking orders. That was the other thing, a large group taking orders. And now I had to be like everybody else. That
Mm,
felt uncomfortable and unnatural to me. And I quit kindergarten for that reason.
wow.
After the gift exchange at the holidays, I'm not an idiot, Natalie. As a 5-year-old, I had my priorities straight, seriously. But I did. I quit kindergarten to start my own production company with kids in the neighborhood singing to records and dancing and performing. And I actually made a little money at it.
Oh,
But it's
wow.
because I couldn't be part of the group in kindergarten doing what everybody else did. It felt unnatural to me.
Mm,
But listen, I'm like ancient now. And because of people like you that I've been connecting with and talking to, I'm processing this and I'm like, okay, so maybe you should not continue to beat yourself up from many years ago. And I'm
yeah.
not unusual. People do this.
Right. And this is why I weave a lot of like sports psychology and motivation stuff into my work with people, because it's like there's a reason why I know that, I had an opportunity to work on like a side project doing illustration. I had maybe a block myself with my own art. And I had just was struggling to have the motivation to do it. But as soon as I was like potentially being hired by somebody else to illustrate this book, I was all of the sudden very motivated to do it because I was afraid of letting someone down. I was afraid of the criticism. So I feel like a lot of what I'm teaching people too is that we're not looking to have the absence of anxiety. Anxiety is really important thing. It's like if I'm around someone that makes me uncomfortable, sometimes there's a reason we should feel uncomfortable. It's our body telling us something, and to listen to that. But I think what we're trying to do is find that edge really where I have, I'm having this connection to my motivation. I'm able to do things, but not doing it in a self-deprecating way.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
and I love the story about the kindergarten, and that's amazing. You started a production company in kindergarten. And I think even what stood out to me in your story made me wonder is like there's two different terms. It's called pathological demand avoidance, or one someone recently turned me on to is persistent demand for autonomy instead of that. But it's the sense
Mm.
of, for some reason, when people with autism or ADHD are given a direct order, hey, don't do that or do this, then it just triggers this, like, no, I won't. I'm not going to do it kind of feeling. And it's like interesting, even that, and I even wonder for you what it was like to have that awareness of just yourself as a kindergartner years later and noticing all this. It's like, even for you, the process, maybe I'm imagining that you had to go through as realizing maybe these different events or times in your life with the information you have now and what you lacked then.
Absolutely. I just did what came natural. So when I told my parents as a 5-year-old, I don't think kindergarten's the right place for me. This is what I think is right for me. And to have them say, okay. I mean, those
Wow.
are good
Mm.
parents that didn't say,
Yeah.
are you kidding? You're just 5. You have no idea what you're
Yeah.
talking about. No, they said, okay. And so that was a gift. I mean, that was really a
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah.
Now, lastly, we have to have we don't have to. People have intimate relationships, right? At a certain point, we start connecting with one another. Uh, and you and your husband are an interesting combination to me when you first explained that, here's what you each have and what it's like when you come when AUDHD meets ADHD, what is that like in your relationship? Um, how do you have to how do you have to be aware of what's going on and how to smooth it out?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's hilarious and challenging. It really, I feel, for us creates a lot of joy, and it can be very funny. And we both are very silly, kind of joyful people, which makes it a lot easier to really have that period. But I think for him, he was late diagnosis, and then I understood earlier on. So I was, maybe unpacking stuff with him, but it's just I feel because ADHD and autism and neurodivergence term like is such a spectrum, it's really, even looking within ADHD, that it's no one size fits all. It's not even a spectrum like this. It's kind of like that picture where you have the different points around and looking, and with him even it's he's more of the hyperactive type and I'm more of the inattentive type. And so even for us when we're having conversations, sometimes I will tell him, okay, I need to have like a serious conversation with you. And if it's a serious conversation for me, I might feel like a little nervous about it, or just like really need someone like right here with me to have the conversation. And then he has the opposite presentation of that. So for him, he's like, oh, well, if we're going to have a conversation, I need to be like, like fiddling with things or moving. He needs to move to concentrate. And I think that's something you see a lot of times is that's why a lot of ADHD people might have two screens. I'm watching TV while on my phone or doing multiple things at the same time. And so that was really challenging for us to even, sometimes figure out how to sit down and have a conversation. And, maybe after a lot of trial and error, what we kind of found was, okay, well, if we go for walks, that's helpful because he's moving and then I'm still getting the stimulation of like, while I'm walking, I can hyper focus on him a bit. So that was really helpful because I'm more, another issue we'll have is, I'm more visually distracted by things. He's more distracted by auditory things than I am. So we just have to really have dialogue with each other, um, share how we feel about things. I know for me, a lot of things that I've done, challenges is that because of my bluntness and literal thinking, sometimes just the way I frame things in my brain is just like data and very matter of fact. And sometimes I've said things that I'm just coming from this like factual, logical place to him. And then he'll tell me later, hey, you said that way and it really hurt my feelings. And we had something like that happen recently. And so then I came back around and said, okay, so if I ask this as a question, that might be better for you. So it's really just, I feel, having that dialogue, but it's been, I've learned a lot and I think it's made me a stronger like clinician, honestly. And it's interesting even looking, in marriages and relationships of what it's like to have a partner that one person is having like ADHD symptoms and one that is not versus two in the relationships. It can be very, no relationship's the same too, not to put anything in a box, but it's,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking while you were talking, well, might it be easier? Not that you can plan these things out, but might it be easier if one person was on the spectrum and the other person wasn't, so that the person who wasn't can be as flexible as possible, allowing the one on the spectrum to be themselves, to just, do what feels right for them. Um, but I find it interesting when two people are on the spectrum or have aspects of neurodivergency, one would hope or think both people would be very understanding of one another. But as they're trying to be, the intention is to be understanding, there's still all this stuff going on that you each have to adjust to, as opposed to one person adjusting, the other person isn't. I don't know, Natalie. I just find it fascinating. And then I asked you about, have you watched Love on the Spectrum, the Netflix series, which is in another season? It's been going on. I found that fascinating it's set up that both people are autistic. That's how it's set up for all these different people trying to establish relationships. And the thing that stood out the most to me in a very positive way is the frankness that they both had with one another. The no holds barred on, well, this doesn't work for me. This doesn't make me feel good, right? Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's very relieving just to be able to say, I'm overstimulated and have too much on my schedule, or, I don't want to do that, or I'm not like, interested in that is, I feel that's why a lot of maybe sometimes autistic people maybe have come across as rude, right? Because it's just very bluntly kind of just the way of synthesizing the information is that I'm just focused on data and rightness and the logic of it, I guess for me at least, and then the way replying to people. And I've had to learn really to kind of slow my brain down even or slow down and think, okay, how do I, it's almost like even when I write emails, I would just write one word like reply emails, but I know sometimes people can take those emails as like, oh, do they not like me or this or that? So I try to make sure I'm putting in language like, hey, I hope you're doing well or things like that, but it is, I think there's, looking at the benefits and challenges of things. I think we can look at I haven't seen that show, yet, and it's on my list. But yeah, I think there's really looking at the benefit of that, but it's even looking in all brain types of, every aspect of like people on the spectrum or having ADHD that it might look differently. Like, for example, even in my relationship, I tend to be like really like right on time or down to the last minute. And with my husband, I also have time blindness. So I just if I'm taking a shower or doing dishes or something like that, it could be 5 minutes or 30 minutes. I would not be able to tell the difference. And that becomes a challenge for us because he gets very anxious about being on time. Some other people with ADHD I know are just really struggle to be on time at all. And that can be an aspect too, I think, of even looking at how are we communicating in little things. And even when you look at couples therapy, it's really looking at, figuring out how in the day to day to have a better flow of communication and having, and I think what you're saying at the beginning earlier was emphasizing that intimacy and that connection and that closeness. And how do I be authentic, but then also be mindful of how I'm being authentic is going to impact other people and try to do that in a kind way as well.
It's also hard, but it's also interesting at the same time. And so, in conclusion, I want to do some takeaways here. So, why is therapy important? It's important to understand yourself. It's important to understand the significance of what you're looking at as your behavior traits, as your of your thought processes, of your choices in life, and thinking there's something wrong with you when there really isn't. It's just about learning how to understand who you are with a professional who wants you to quiet the inner critic, be compassionate, understand that there are ways of dealing with whatever it is that you may find uncomfortable, even if you just say, well, then I'm not going to do it. If it's not that important, it's not essential to life. I'm just not going to do it. And that's okay too. And so I think therapy, especially with somebody as experienced and exceptional as you are, not only living it, but helping other people live through it, is really important because people who are neurodivergent, depending on what it is, will tend to be alone, will cut themselves off from social circles, will tend to be overweight because they stay in the house and they don't join social activities sometimes. And I just think that it's wonderful what you do, Natalie, to really dig in and equalize whatever the uncomfortable feelings are, because you now understand where they come from and how to move yourself forward through them. Is there anything you would like to add to the benefit of therapy from what I just recapped?
No, I think that is, I think the emphasis 100% is not feeling or being alone. That is what we see, what heals people. That's what we see is that's why I'm not worried about, AI or things like that because it is the act of two humans connecting and having the space to do that. And I feel maybe a couple points I would add. Maybe that, some of the models that I use are what's called somatic or body based. And I found that that's very helpful with ADHD in maybe a sense of having either hypervigilance or hypoarousal, where you're not as, connected with your body. I feel with the presentation and having a very logical stance, even that sometimes when we focus, offering a blend of what's called talk therapy and somatic therapy, that having the blend of both, or even having a therapy where you're learning to connect with your body more, and process things. I use something called EMDR, brain spotting, and internal family systems. And I found a lot of these really helpful because we're actually healing the brain. We're tapping into the brain's natural ability and the body's ability to heal itself. And I feel that, having someone that I think understands the neurodivergent piece, the trauma piece in selecting a therapist is very important. And offering some of these models, because I think sometimes there's, some folks that maybe get to that point where they're like, great, I understand all the things, but it's not changing. And maybe those are some ways that can help change that as well too. But it is, one of the key things about the model of even brain spotting is that it is the attunement of the person, of the therapist and the client and the person that we're with, that what is allowing us to heal that, because trauma and bullying and these things like that, a lot of times people experience them when they are alone. And so the idea is to go back to those places and kind of have a redo, or have the healing take place when we're not alone anymore. And then even through the understanding, then we can, have better interactions and build on the strengths and have a hope for a better future, and meeting our desires and connection and relationships in life. So that, I think, are all the wonderful things about therapy.
Wonderful things about therapy and wonderful things about your therapy. People can connect with you if they go to nataliezimtherapy.com. Yes,
Yes.
through your website they can find you. Natalie, you're such a gift. Thank you. Really, thank you. You're a lovely person. And I just, I love that you have brought yourself into your work. And that's how connected you are to your clients, that you 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 share connectedness with them. That's what I like about you and the service you provide. So I'm so
Yeah.
happy I met you. Thank you.
I'm thrilled, and thank you so much. I'm really thrilled about what you're doing and just trying to bring awareness to, parents and people in these spaces. I think is just the work you're doing is really important.
Thank you.
And I think you're a great host. You're a great question asker, and I've really enjoyed just our time together.
Shucks. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is an absolute pleasure. And thank all of you for listening. This was a great session, and I know you got a lot out of it. And I conclude every episode with this: in the world of special needs people, we all need each other. Talk to you next week.